So I am very excited to welcome this great group of people who just came into the webinar with us. Welcome to another exciting dynamic conversation with the Allentown Art Museum tonight in partnership with the Lehigh Valley JAJAJA. So before we dive into the program, I'd like to do a couple of quick introductions. First up is Miki Sankary. Miki is the development manager at the U.S.-Japan Council, working remotely from Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. Her responsibilities include managing the donor relations program through identifying, cultivating, and stewarding donors to support key programs and fundraising initiatives for the organization. She was first involved in the Tomodachi SoftBank Leadership Initiative at the University of California, Berkeley in 2012, and was a member of the 2015 Emerging Leadership Program cohort. Miki brings to USJC her experiences from previously working as an Associate Director of Development for Innovative Entrepreneurial Programs at Lehigh University. Prior to that, she was a project manager and a sustainability consultant certifying green buildings in Chicago and across the US and Canada. She was recognized by the Chicago Scholars Foundation as one of the 35 under 35 young professionals impacting the Chicagoland community. In Pennsylvania, she organized a group called the Lehigh Valley JAJAJA to build a community of Japanese in America, Japanese Americans, and Japanese aficionados in the region to continue to celebrate her bilingual and bicultural passions. She received her BA in Political Economy and Conservation Resources from the University of California, Berkeley. Miki, thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you.
Also with us, we have Claire McRee from the Allentown Art Museum. Claire McRee is the Associate Curator at the Allentown Art Museum. She received her MA from the Bard Graduate Center in Decorative Arts, Design History, and Material Culture, and she specializes in the study of historic clothing and textiles. She has curated many exhibitions at the museum, including two of the ones we will be discussing tonight, Intuition and Reflection, the ceramics of Toshiko Takezu, and Collecting Across Cultures, Japanese textiles in the West. Claire, thank you for being with us tonight as well.
Thanks, Abby.
So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to you, Claire, so you can share with us some of the exciting Japanese art we have right now at the Allentown Art Museum.
So I'm really excited to share with you this evening some of the extraordinary number of works of Japanese art on view this fall at the Allentown Art Museum, as well as around the Lehigh Valley. And so I'm going to introduce three exhibitions that are currently on view at the museum, which feature Japanese art, and also one at Lafayette College, which features works on loan from the Allentown Art Museum's collection. So the first exhibition I wanted to share is Washi Transformed, our featured fall exhibition. And this exhibition presents the work of 9 contemporary Japanese artists working in the medium of washi, which is traditional Japanese handmade paper. Washi's been used in Japan for over 1,000 years for art forms like printmaking, calligraphy, and painting. And it's a unique type of paper because it's unusually strong. The paper mulberry bark that's typically used to make it has long fibers that remain whole in the paper making process. And so washi is much stronger than Western style wood pulp paper. And in this photograph here, you see Yuko Kimura, one of the artists in the exhibition, in the process of making a sheet of washi. And here's an example of her work, which really brings together paper making, collage, printmaking, and fiber art in fun and unexpected ways. And so I wanted to highlight a few artists from this exhibition. There's so much to say, but we have so little time, so I'm going to keep it brief. So Ariko Horiki is one of the artists I wanted to highlight. Her work really uses washi as a medium for contemporary interior design. And one theme that you'll see throughout this exhibition is this balance between tradition and innovation that, you know, you see throughout the work of these artists, taking this traditional Japanese medium and making it into something that, you know, is going in unexpected directions and has this contemporary resonance as well. So in this photograph, you can see up close her washi light objects from the Tane series, which means seed. And these are, you know, really beautiful, inspired by organic forms. Horiki actually incorporates those concentric lines that you see on these works. They're actually incorporated into the sheet of washi paper. And so it's really, you know, this really intensive process. She studied traditional paper making with master washi makers in order to start this. And she works with a team of artists to be able to create these custom sheets of washi for her designs. Ayomi Yoshida is a printmaker, and she created the installation work Blessed Rain for this exhibition. And it's actually, so this installation, you can walk inside of it. It's a really immersive experience. And with this work, she's interested in exploring how rain has been historically seen as a blessing in Japanese culture, that it's, you know, watering the crops, bringing life. She mentions in her statement on the work that rain is an iconic theme in Japanese art. And here you see an example from Hiroshige's Tokaido Road series with the motif of rain. And today, she notes that climate change related disasters such as flooding and landslides have lent a negative connotation to rain. And so she really wants to encourage us to reflect on this shift in the perception of rain in Japanese culture, and also trying to, you know, explore how we can retrieve some of these meanings associated with rain, the significance. Kakuko Ishii takes washi in a really different direction. She's a fiber artist, and she creates sculptures in her recent work from washi paper cords that are called mizuhiki. They're made from washi and glue. And so mizuhiki are traditionally used to tie around gifts or sacred offerings, but she's transformed them, taken them in new and unexpected directions, and made them into a medium for sculpture, creating these really interesting organic forms that evoke trees and branches or sea creatures. So her work is just very unique and unexpected, especially in an exhibition about traditional Japanese paper. And I wanted to give you a taste of a couple more artists from the exhibition, just because there's such a variety of work and such a range of techniques used. Here you see works by Yuko Nishimura. She creates compositions and sculptures in folded paper. And here is a work by Hina Aoyama. What you're seeing here is actually a composition made entirely of cut paper. So the black lines are actually lace-like cutouts made from a sheet of paper. So just really the technical skill here is just so amazing. And so if you're able, I really encourage you to come to the museum and see Washi Transformed in person. It's an exhibition that is really interesting for its emphasis on materials and process, and really kind of draws you in with these details, you know, seeing this mastery and creativity within art making with this medium. And so it's a really wonderful exhibition to get to see in person. And it is a traveling exhibition. The Allentown Art Museum is actually the first stop on its national tour, which is exciting for us. And so moving on, I wanted to talk a little bit about the Japanese art collection at the Allentown Art Museum, because the other exhibitions I'm going to share with you tonight are all drawn from the museum's holdings. So our Japanese collection includes over 1,400 ukiyo-e woodblock prints, as well as over 300 textiles and costume from Japan, and assorted decorative arts and other media. And so this area of the collection, one way that we've really been looking at it and working on displaying it in the galleries has been in the context of exchange and art within a global context. So that's a theme you'll see kind of throughout the exhibitions, and really with washi as well. So the second exhibition I'd like to share with you this evening focuses on the work of the artist Toshiko Takezu. And so this exhibition is drawn from the museum's collection and really parallels nicely with the themes of tradition versus innovation, playing with the boundary between past and the contemporary world that we saw with Washi Transformed. Takezu was a Japanese American sculptor, and she was really a pioneering figure within the studio craft movement. This was a movement beginning around the 1950s and continuing to today, where artists have been exploring media that are traditionally considered craft or artisan-based, used for functional objects, such as ceramics, woodworking, textiles, and fiber art. And so these Takezu and other artists in the middle decades of the 20th century said, why can't these media be used for fine art? And she was really a leading figure in this movement with her groundbreaking ceramic work. And kind of a parallel to this, when we're thinking about washi is also a medium that had been seen more for the craft versus contemporary art. And it was some of the artists in the exhibition, like Kyoko Ibe in the 60s and 70s, that were breaking ground and saying, no, washi can be a fine art medium. So there's some cool parallels there. Takezu is known for her closed forms, which are what you're looking at now, essentially a ceramic vessel that's almost entirely closed off except for a tiny pinhole opening at the top, which you can see that little nub there. And so these forms really deny the traditional utilitarian associations with ceramic objects and take it into the realm of sculpture. She was really interested in the idea of the dark space inside her vessels as this source of mystery and power. And once she developed the closed form in the late 1950s, this was a theme that she worked with for the rest of her career. So essentially from the 1960s until her death in 2011, she was creating variations on the closed form. And so the one exception to that, when she started making closed forms, she essentially stopped with traditional or functional ceramics, but she did make tea bowls throughout her career. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the Japanese influences on her work. I mentioned that she was Japanese American. She was born and grew up in Hawaii. Her parents were Japanese immigrants. And she grew up in a traditional Japanese household, speaking Japanese at home. On the other hand, her artistic education was primarily in the United States. She attended Cranbrook, which was the really the foremost design school in the US in the mid 20th century. Lots of really well-known leading figures in American mid-century design were there at that time. And she actually didn't have the opportunity to travel to Japan until she was in her early 30s. She was able to visit for the first time, and she stayed there for 8 months and was able to study traditional ceramics with Japanese masters, the tea ceremony, and Zen Buddhism. And so this opportunity to travel to Japan was really key within her career and within the development of her approach to sculpture. And her work is also informed by Buddhist principles as well, in particular her approach. She really saw the process of creating these ceramic vessels as a sort of meditation, where through the repetition, through making the closed form and exploring this again and again, you can gain deeper insight. And she really followed instinct when she was working. For instance, when she was making a series or a sculpture, she would wait until after she'd completed it to decide what the title was and to kind of reflect on kind of the meaning that she was creating. And she also saw the fire as in the kiln as a collaborator. So chance accidents in the kiln, unexpected outcomes were all just part of the art. And so one thing that was funny when I was researching for this exhibition is that Japanese catalogs talking about Takezu said, oh, her work has so much Japanese influence and her heritage comes through so strongly. And then American catalogs would say the opposite, that, oh, you know, this has really been overstated. She should be seen in the context of American artists. So I wanted to share some thoughts from that side as well. Thinking about her peers in the American art world at this time, they're the abstract expressionists, and movements like in this vein are exploring how intuition, spontaneity, improvisation all have a place in the creation of art. And many artists, many American artists are taking an interest in Eastern philosophy and religion, including Buddhism. And so in this print by Robert Motherwell, you see this very gestural, calligraphy-like form inspired by East Asian calligraphy. And, you know, visually this really, you know, resonates with what Takezu's doing at the same time. That, you know, when she was glazing her ceramics, she had a very spontaneous approach, and she used brushes, but also dripped and poured glaze, applied it with her fingers. So there are definitely parallels in kind of the way she's working and the freedom that she's bringing to that. And one of the reasons that she developed the closed form was actually because she wanted a continuous surface in order to paint, rather than a canvas which has distinct edges. So it's really interesting thinking of her work not just as form, but also as surface as well, and just how innovative she was. So the third exhibition currently up at the Allentown Art Museum that I want to share this evening is titled Collecting Across Cultures, again drawn from the museum's holdings. And this exhibition looks at American collectors in the late 19th and early 20th centuries who are collecting Japanese textiles. And one of the goals with this exhibition was really to look for some of the invisible stories that aren't always apparent when you're looking at a work of art in a gallery. Museums don't always ask you to think about, how did this get here, or why is this here? And so this exhibition aims to bring up some of those questions. And it also gives a context for for a lot of our Japanese textile collection and print collection as well, many of this comes from this early turn of the century collecting context. So it's kind of exploring that story that is particular to these objects as well. And so this exhibition has been presented in a series of rotations of 3 or 4 textiles. We're in the 6th rotation now, so the 6th and final rotation. And this is because textiles, they're light sensitive, and so they can't be on long-term view in our galleries. But it's been really exciting to be able to really explore this area of the collection in depth. There's a lot of rich material there, and just to get, have these different groups of objects that have been moving through this space. And so one of the motivations for us to show the Japanese textiles was the library from the Little House, which is at the museum and was designed by Frank Lloyd Wright, completed in 1915. And so Wright was a passionate collector of Japanese art, in particular ukiyo-e woodblock prints, which we exhibit in the library. We actually know that the family kept one hanging in the library. But Wright also collected Japanese textiles. And so this really gives just a broader context for his work, his design, and thinking about the influences on his art. And so Wright really fits into a broader context of American artists and designers who, at this time, many of them are collecting Japanese art and drawing inspiration from Japanese aesthetics, such as asymmetry and stylized natural motifs, for their own work. And really a lot of what we consider modern design in the West owes a great debt to Japanese aesthetic sensibilities. Here you're seeing a print by Helen Hyde, an American artist who studied woodblock printing in Japan and adopted very similar techniques for her own practice. And on the other hand, you have collectors who are purchasing the textiles for their own interest and their own passion, often for display as home decor, which was fashionable at the turn of the century. So you have different groups of Americans and Europeans collecting textiles, as well as other Japanese art forms with different motivations. But with this exhibition, I really didn't want it to be one-sided about Western people collecting Japanese art and the meaning they found. It was really important to also think about the significance that these textiles had within Japanese culture, and also the, kind of the complex stories and physical journeys that the textiles actually took. And so I wanted to share this textile, which is from one of our past rotations, as a case study, because it opens up some interesting questions here. So this is an altar cloth, or ukishiki, that would have been used in a Buddhist temple, covering a table that would hold candles and other implements. And one thing that's really exciting about this textile is that we know that it dates to 1760 and was donated by 20 community members to their local Buddhist temple, because there's an inscription on the reverse of the textile detailing this and listing the names of the donors. So that's a very cool human connection and story associated with this textile. And so the reason that this important and unique textile left its temple and ended up in the hands of a Pennsylvanian collector in the early 20th century has to do with political shifts and upheaval in Japan in the late 1800s. Japan's Meiji government at that time was pursuing rapid modernization, and especially modernization through Westernization. And among their policies were anti-Buddhist policies that cut off traditional income sources for Buddhist temples and made it necessary for temples in need of funding to look to assets they could sell, such as textiles. And so you have a lot of textiles from a religious context coming onto the market and being purchased by foreign collectors at this time in the late 1800s. And so that gives a really, kind of a complex side to the story of why this textile is here today. And I wanted to share one other exciting facet of this textile story with you, which was kind of a happy accident and surprise. I was doing research for the current rotation of textiles, not even trying to research this textile, but I came across a theatrical costume in the collection of the Victoria and Albert Museum in London, made from the same fabric. So this was very exciting. And, it was a really unique and exciting survival of two objects made from that same cloth. And this is actually, not often do you get the surviving examples in different collections like this, but it's evidence of a fairly common practice in Japan. Historically, elite luxury garments and fine theatrical costumes would be donated to Buddhist temples for use, to be remade into textiles for spiritual use, whether that is something like the ukishiki that we have in our collection or vestments. So this was a practice that would bring good fortune to the donors and really shaped is really a particularly Japanese Buddhist practice, and is part of the art associated with Japanese Buddhism. And so it's just really fascinating to think about the journey of, the history, the story of this fabric. So the cloth itself would have been commissioned to order by the theatrical company and woven by a specialty workshop. This is really high-end skilled work with this metallic thread and this intricate patterning. The fabric was then made into costumes for the theatrical company, like the robe here. And then eventually one or more of those robes were donated to a Buddhist temple and made into this altar cloth. And so it's just fascinating to think about that circulation, the story of this textile within Japan in the 1700s, and then, coming into the more recent past of the textile, that it ended up two pieces of it in two different collections across the Atlantic in two different countries. And just one other detail regarding this textile that's kind of fun because it pulls in washi again, is that this type of metallic brocade textile was made using gilded washi paper. So you can see in the detail images at the left, those are of different textiles, but show this process. So on top, you can see the strips of the gold paper and how they're wider than the silk threads around them. And then the photo, the small detail below, shows the reverse of a textile, where you can see the white of the paper running across the back where it's not part of the pattern. So it was only gilded on one side. And so I just wanted to encourage you to come out and see the final rotation of textiles. It's been really a delight to explore this area of our collection. And so finally, I wanted to remind everyone to drop your questions in the Q&A. We're really excited for our conversation. And I'm just going to give a quick shout out to Lafayette College Art Gallery, which is exhibiting Hiroshige's Tokaido Road series, curated by Dr. Ingrid Furness and Nick Scaglione. And these prints are on loan from the Allentown Art Museum's collection. And so we're really happy for them to have this opportunity to be out on display for our community in the Lehigh Valley to enjoy. And so the Toshiko Road series includes 55 woodblock prints and is really significant in establishing the landscape as a key genre for printmakers in the 1800s. Hiroshige created this series chronicling the stations set up for travelers on the more than 300-mile Toshiko Road between Edo, now Tokyo, and Kyoto. And in their own day, these prints were inexpensive. They were objects that could be souvenirs purchased by tourists and also really encouraged travel. And Hiroshige really has a gift for establishing or for capturing these scenes, these fleeting moments from daily life of just common people who are on the road. And he also creates these beautiful poetic vistas, just the dramatic scenery. And so the Toshiko Road is a theme that Hiroshige revisited throughout his career following the success of this series. And, this series inspired many other artists to take on the landscape as a subject for printmaking. And the Toshiko Road prints are just really iconic within world art history. So it's wonderful to be able to have them on view in our community like this. And so to close, I just wanted to reiterate the exciting and varied opportunities to see Japanese art in the Lehigh Valley this fall, whether at the Allentown Art Museum or at Lafayette College. And these exhibitions really bring up interesting questions and conversation about identity, exchange in a global environment, and also thinking about tradition and innovation. So I'm really looking forward to your questions and our discussion.
That was amazing.
Oh, thank you.
Oh my goodness. And we've got a ton of questions.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, it's so great to see the kind of the enthusiasm behind these questions. And some of them are detailed in kind of the technique. So let me see if I can do a good job of kind of summarizing the questions. So the first question we have is regarding the lanterns or the interior tane.
Yeah, the light objects.
The light objects, specifically about the paper, washi paper. Is it actually flammable, and how was the lighting figures lit, if not by fire?
Okay, that's a great question. So I'm personally not an expert on washi, but I would assume it's flammable like other types of paper. The washi light objects are actually paper that's formed over, that is stretched over a resin form that gives it that really smooth, curvilinear shape that evokes the seeds. And these lights are electric. So there's, not a high risk of fire, especially in our galleries, fortunately.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that's something, the artist also, she works with corporate clients. So she's definitely thinking about the functionality and the practical side of her design as well.
Yeah, awesome. And then we have another technical question about the textiles and the intricacy of the design. How long would it typically take to create a textile like that, or a garment like that? Would you have any idea?
It's hard to say exactly. I think the main thing to think about with textiles like that, brocaded altar cloth, is that historically textiles were just much more valuable than they are today. just thinking about the labor involved to even get to the point of having silk thread, raising silkworms, unspooling the cocoon, spinning the silk, getting to that point, and all of the skilled artisans involved in the process of getting these materials ready, taking it to the point of weaving, and then the weaving itself, probably would take really specialized artisans who had trained in that, and that was their focus in their career. So yeah, probably, potentially weeks or months depending on how big the weaving order was to fill.
I can't imagine. And I feel like, there's probably almost like a assembly line of experts that try to, do their little part to make it perfect. And it does take a village sometimes. Okay, so let's see. Are there any special dyes used to color the washi paper?
Ooh, that's a good question. I know some of the artists in the exhibition use indigo dye, which has been traditionally used with Japanese textiles. And some of the artists also use the Aomi Yoshida, the Blessed Rain that we saw, that's done using indigo. And some of the other artists use indigo colored ink to evoke the color of traditional indigo. And with, I'm not sure of the exact pigment or coloring that Kakuko Ishii is using for her sculptures, which are the ones made of all the little cords, but she is following traditional coloration for the mizuhiki, which are typically red, black, white, or sometimes gold.
I've definitely seen those kinds of greeting cards, or like a wedding card that has this beautiful ribbon around that mizuhiki. Let's see. There's also a deeper question of this theme. There seems to be a theme of elevating and experimenting with traditional materials in the first two exhibitions. Are there other art forms unique to Japan that have pushed visual boundaries and influenced the art world at large?
Oh, wow. That's an amazing question. And I would say I'm not the best person to answer it necessarily, but I think really this is something that we see, with contemporary art, I think in a global sense. I was just thinking of actually, I just saw an exhibition that's contemporary Japanese artists working in lacquer, which I think, again, taking a tradition and, finding a contemporary direction for it. And yeah, and I would really say that not only in Japan, but really all around the world, I think there are a lot of contemporary artists doing really thoughtful work that engages with history and with historic processes and materials, and that kind of has a certain story or important message for us today as well. So yeah, great question.
Yeah, definitely. I almost feel, I personally, with my own background, I think of right off the top of my head, the influence of manga or anime, and that kind of caricature or comic kind of structure of drawings and telling stories, and how much that has really blown, all over the world as a medium in its own right. And then another thing that I was thinking about is this sense of going back to nature and really taking influence and slowing down. And it kind of ties into another question with religious practices and how much that influences the artists and their technique. And part of that religious practice is meditation and really focusing in on that skill set that you were talking about. So how much of that is a one or the other, or which one comes before? How much of a religious influence would you see in Japanese art informing the artist's technique, or the artist's technique informing this practice of religious meditation in a way?
Yeah, I think really, I don't know if I see it as like an either or necessarily, but that, it's two basically two processes or two philosophies, approaches that are really growing and developing in tandem and in conversation with each other. And so you have this really wonderful dialogue and, creativity and, art that deepens spirituality that's really having this innovative impact and encouraging artists to explore and practice in a way that they might not otherwise. And yeah, so I think that's something, we certainly see it with Toshiko Takezu. There's one of the artists in Washi, Yoshio Ikezaki, has a very strong spiritual dimension in his artistic practice as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I really think, there are also parallels in artistic practice from around the world, really, that artists historically, one of the motivations for making art has been, as spiritual expression, as objects of contemplation and faith. If you think of medieval and Renaissance art in Europe. So really, I think that's a great question. And I think, really can be seen in really a global sense as well.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. It's not unique to just Japanese artists either.
No,
right? And that's,
definitely not.
That's the beauty of art, is that it crosses borders, and it's already global.
Definitely. And I wanted to make sure, I know in some of our conversations before tonight, one thing that we brought up that I thought was really interesting, and I wanted to make sure we have time to get to, was kind of your perspective on the JAJAJA, how that relates to some of the themes that we talked about with the exhibitions tonight.
Yeah, thank you so much, Claire, for bringing us in to this stage. And I think that's what's really so important to recognize, that in this Allentown Art Museum, you have so much representation, and from someone who identifies as a Japanese American in the Lehigh Valley, maybe off, from the surface, you may not see that there are quite a great contingent of Pennsylvanians or Lehigh Valleyans that have some kind of a connection with Japan, whether it's their own personal background or their own interests in learning the language or the culture, or wanting to travel there. So there's so many under the surface interests that really connects us. And for me, seeing this exhibit, this Washi Transform, the ceramics, and the woodblock print at Lafayette, it's just it was great to see that representation, and finding a tangible space to connect and even explore our own identities as a Japanese American, or a Japanese in America, and a Japanese aficionados. And that's the whole community of JAJAJA. And that actually brings up a question that I wanted to ask you as a curator. How do you consider the backgrounds or the diversity of the artists when you think about curating a collection? And do you consider the regional backgrounds? Do you consider their ethnic backgrounds or demographic backgrounds? Or how does that diversity angle play into a curation of a collection?
Yeah, what a great question. I would say that that's something that is really at the forefront of conversations in the museum world right now, thinking about how can museums respond to their communities and be representative of their communities. And so at the museum, we think really carefully about, we want to be able to show art from artists of a variety of backgrounds and cultures and time periods to really present a varied program of exhibitions to share with our community. And also, even when we're thinking about acquisitions and collecting and the direction of our collection, we've been focusing on improving the representation of artists of color, in particular African American and Latinx artists in the collection, because we want to be able to have that representation in our galleries, to have that physical presence on the gallery walls.
Mhm. Awesome. Yeah, I'm looking at the time, and I think we have one good question that I like. I don't know the name of the person, but they're interested in the mysteriousness of the closed vessels by Takezu. And did she ever talk about their interiors or what's inside? And why is it empty, or are there pieces inside it? And what was kind of the artist's rationale behind a closed vessel?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. There's actually a quote from Takezu that we have on the wall in the exhibition that talks about the dark hidden space inside being like the spark of life that's inside a person. So this idea of this, this kind of hidden, mysterious source of energy and life. And she also, she was interested in kind of engaging with that space as well. In some of her vessels, she actually placed small clay balls inside that would rattle as the vessel was handled. And so, I think her work, it's interesting. I think it's really meant to be this sensory experience, and the way that it feels in your hand and the way it sounds when you handle it, which as a museum is, unfortunately challenging for us to realistically do in an exhibition setting. But we do have a video in the exhibition where you can listen to and watch some of the sculptures being handled to get that sense. And that's also available on our YouTube channel as well, if you're not local to us.
Wow. This was like such an amazing conversation. I'm just like so happy to have been able to sit and listen and hear both of your insights on Japanese art and the influence that Japan has had, globally and on the art world at large. It's just been fascinating. So thank you both so much, Miki and Claire, for being here tonight and sharing your expertise and your insights into all of this wonderful material. Miki, I would love for you to take a second to share a little bit about how we might be able to connect with JAJAJA and learn more about your organization and other events that you guys might have coming up.
Awesome. Thanks, Abby. Yeah, so I gave a little overview or by name. We are the Lehigh Valley JAJAJA, and it's currently a virtual community. And we try to get together once a month. So this is one example of connecting with our partner organizations in the area that are celebrating, learning about, exploring Japanese art, culture, and language. And so there's, just to give you an idea, Japanese in America is one type of JAJAJA member, and a Japanese American who's born in the US but has some ancestral ties or heritage to Japan. And then Japanese aficionados, folks like Claire, that have really dedicated a part of their intelligence to learn so much about Japanese culture and wants to celebrate it. And that's what we're all about. So I'm happy to share my contact information. There's a link here with our website. And I can't believe it's December already, but next year, we don't even know what's down the pipeline, but at least I know we definitely want to encourage getting together and maybe even doing a trip to the Allentown Art Museum as a community group too, to really engage and deepen our participation with the museum.
Absolutely, that would be amazing. would be really cool.
Yeah, we'd love to have you.
Yes.
Thank
I'd also like to share a little bit about the Allentown Art Museum and where you can come and see some of these great exhibitions. You heard all about them from Claire, but there is nothing like seeing them in person. So you can come and see Washi Transforming, New Expressions in Japanese paper right now through January 2nd. So there's only about 1 month left, so come while you can. Intuition and Reflection, the ceramics of Toshiko Takezu is now on view, and it will be on view through August 14th of 2022, so a little bit more time there. And then Collecting Across Cultures, Japanese Textiles in the West. That has ongoing rotation, so we have new textiles that go up every 3 or 4 months. Is that right, Claire?
So we're in the 6th and final rotation for that show. Yeah, it's going to be coming down soon. It's been a while.
Yes.
So that closes on March 27th, 2022.
Yes, so come and see it all while you can. Again, if you come before January 2nd, you can see all of it all at once. I'd also like to share some exciting new programming that's coming up related to washi. We are having our washi weekend at the museum this upcoming weekend. So on Saturday, December 4th, if you're a member at the museum, we have an exclusive workshop with artist Anthony Smith that will be available from 1 to 2:30 this Saturday, December 4th. It's by registration. All you have to do is go to allentownartmuseum.org and you'll find the link to register there. And then on Sunday, we will have some programs open to the public. The first is a very exciting tour of washi with our curator, Claire McRee. So you'll get to see her lovely face again on Sunday if you register for that tour. Space is limited, so please, please, please make sure you register and sign up as soon as possible. We'll also have another washi workshop, a hands-on art making washi workshop with artist Ray Ukon, who's a recent graduate of Lehigh University. He'll be doing a washi collage workshop from 12 to 3. You don't have to register for that, but it is drop in, first come, first serve. Again, this Sunday from 12 to 3. I would like to thank again both Claire and Miki for being here tonight and sharing your expertise and your insights. It's really been such a wonderful evening. And I'd like to thank all of our attendees who joined us. I did see a question about where you might be able to watch this again or share this, this wonderful conversation with friends who might not have been able to make it. This video will be available on the Allentown Art Museum YouTube page before the end of this week. So keep an eye out there, and I'm sure we'll share it on our social media at some point as well, but you will be able to access this conversation again by the end of the week. So without anything else, I want to say thank you again to everyone, especially you, Miki and Claire. It's been absolutely wonderful. We couldn't have done this without you both.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much, Miki. I'm so glad that you reached out and we were able to have this conversation. And yeah.
Yes, we wouldn't have been here without you, Miki. So thank you for initiating the conversation, and thank you for sharing all of this wonderful information about JAJAJA. And I hope that we can work together again soon.
Sounds great.
Awesome. Have a wonderful night, everyone. Thanks again.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.